If you were to look at the map of Africa in the early 1970s, you would see that most of it was now independent. You would also notice one major exception, Portugal. Why was Portugal one of the last European nations to begin the process of decolonization? On May 28, 1926, the failing First Portuguese Republic was overthrown in a coup led by General Manuel Gomes da Costa, who was himself overthrown in another coup, this time led by Oscar Carmona. Carmona ruled Portugal for 5 years in a period that is now called the Ditadura Nacional. But Carmona inherited a country plagued by political chaos, anarchy, a huge public debt, and a dysfunctional government incapable of actually controlling the nation and her vast overseas empire. In response, Carmona appointed a man named Antonio de Oliveira Salazar as finance minister. Antonio Salazar was, at that time, a lecturer at Coimbra University, Portugal's oldest and most prestigious university. He was also a well-known Catholic and conservative, which made him popular among the Catholic and conservative government. He was also literally the only person qualified for the post, since Portugal had a severe deficit in economists. Salazar knew this, and only became the finance minister with the condition that he would do whatever he wanted and that his orders would be obeyed. Surprisingly, his policies worked, and within a year he had balanced the budget and essentially solved Portugal's financial issues. By this point, everyone knew that without him, the country would collapse yet again, and in 1932, Salazar formally became the prime minister and the period known as the Estado Novo began. From this point onwards, even though Oscar Carmona was still the president and technically held power over the prime minister, Salazar had all the real power and his presidents were only puppets. As prime minister, Salazar implemented an economic and social system known as corporatism, which was based on the writings of the Catholic Church and was influenced by the ideas of Benito Mussolini. Under this system, a society would be divided into groups, each fulfilling a specific task. Together, these groups would be able to run the country much more smoothly than other systems such as communism or capitalism. It's important to remember that corporatism is not equal to corporatocracy, which is a system where rich people bribe the government to do what it wants. Under corporatism, Portugal gained a shiny new constitution and became a one-party dictatorship, outlawing all opposition and persecuting any opponents to the new regime. However, Salazar actually disliked fascism and in 1932 carried out a purge against the Portuguese fascist movement, denouncing it as a pagan system with no morals. During the Second World War, Portugal remained neutral, but similarly to nationalist Spain, leaned towards the Axis until it became clear that they were going to lose, at which point it began supporting the Allies instead. Following the war, Portugal was a founding member of NATO and took a firm anti-communist stance. However, unlike the other colonial empires, Salazar refused to decolonize and instead supported a theory known as pluricontinentalism, which claimed that Portugal was not an empire, but simply one big nation stretching over several continents. This theory was obviously not very popular with the United States and the Soviet Union, and the regime's growing isolation once again caused Portugal's economy to stall. Soon, the growing calls for decolonization led to the Overseas War, a 20-year-long campaign of guerrilla warfare in the Portuguese colonies of Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea. These wars severely crippled Portugal's economy, and soon foreign sanctions had caused the nation to stagnate. President Carmona died in 1951 and was replaced by Francisco Lopez, who was immediately sacked because he opposed Salazar. Because the president was still elected by the common people and had the power to remove the prime minister, Salazar officially abolished direct elections and instead had his puppet National Assembly choose a president. But by the 1960s, the Estado Novo's costly colonial wars and oppressive behavior had alienated the people and led to many calls by exiled opposition groups, most notably the Portuguese National Liberation Front, to call for an uprising. In response, Salazar had the leader of the Liberation Front assassinated. But Salazar himself died in 1970 and was replaced by Marcelo Gaetano, who attempted to reform the government but failed due to opposition from the conservative faction. Additionally, the long independence wars in Angola and Mozambique had thoroughly stopped Portugal's economic growth, and more than 1 million people fled the nation during the course of the wars in order to seek opportunity elsewhere. In 1974, with a stagnating economy and popular discontent at an all-time high, members of the military led what is now called the Carnation Revolution and overthrew the Estado Novo, bringing democracy back to Portugal for the first time in 50 years. The Portuguese African colonies were given their independence by 1975, and the last Portuguese overseas possession, Macau, was given back to China in 1999, marking the formal end of the Portuguese Empire after nearly 600 years of existence. In the end, even though the Estado Novo brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire, to a nation plagued by internal violence, It failed to adapt to the changing times, and corporatism became effectively obsolete by the second half of the 20th century. Even though Salazar's early policies caused an extraordinary boom in Portugal's economy, by the fall of the Estado Novo, Portugal still had one of the weakest per capita income rates in Western Europe. This was because Salazar, unlike Francisco Franco in Spain, refused to change his economic system and reform his government, which ultimately led to the regime's collapse. Grândola, Vila Morena.